Hello. At the end of the 2010 season of American Idol, America's favorite judge, Simon Cowell, left the show in order to start a new show, X-Factor. And actually, I was hoping that X-Factor would be a sort of replacement for American Idol and actually supersede the show. X-Factor did actually quite well for a while. The initial analysis following the first season was that it was working and it was going to go over with audiences very well. However, Simon Cowell had originally predicted that the show would reach an audience of 20 million, and that didn't happen, in large part because there were a lot of reality shows on the air at the time. Now, a lot of them weren't particularly successful in the way that American Idol had been in its early years. The Voice, even now, continues to limp along, and it's achieved some rating success over the years, but The Voice has never actually produced any stars, and that's actually the point, isn't it? So, one of the big problems with American Idol, and it was on the fall schedule of the Fox network, was that there was just a lot on the air at the time. It was also moving into the holiday season. American Idol had always been a bright spot in the winter doldrums, but X-Factor premiered during a season where actually there's quite a lot going on. It's leading up to the holidays, it's a big sports time moving toward the World Series, and just a lot going on that time of year. But X-Factor also had some issues which prevented the show from being all that it could have been. I think it could have been a great replacement for American Idol and superseded the show if they hadn't run into certain issues. And one of those issues, of course, happened to be the composition of the judging panel. They couldn't seem to get a stable judging panel, and some of the people they got were sort of questionable. Demi Lovato was only a couple of years away from Camp Rock 2, the final jam, when she got the job as a judge on X-Factor. And quite frankly, I never thought Demi Lovato was mature enough to actually be a good judge on a reality singing show. Very young person, always came across as immature to my way of thinking. And it's nothing against the Camp Rock movies. I love the Camp Rock movies. I thought it's a great story. I wish there were actually a place like that. You know, nothing at all against the Camp Rock movies. They were great entertainment, great story, and all of that. But I never thought Demi Lovato had the gravitas, in spite of the fact that she had a lot of commercial success and still has a lot of commercial success. I never thought that she had the same gravitas as Simon Cowell, who was an expert in the industry, a record company executive for many years. L.A. Reid was a good judge in many respects, but he seemed to have this prejudice against older contestants, against older singers. And I never really thought that was justified, because I certainly think that older singers, older contestants, can be very successful in the music industry if they're given the right opportunity. Now, I don't think that people above a certain, well, I really don't think anybody should be working 16 hours a day to secure their careers in the entertainment industry. Physically and mentally, that's just kind of ridiculous. And I know it's an extremely competitive field, and you have to be very good, and you have to be constantly developing your talent. But the expectation that people work 16 hours a day, to me, that's just ridiculous. And I think that may have been one reason that L.A. was a little bit prejudiced against the older singers. I think that older people absolutely can be extremely good. They can break into the entertainment industry and they can do just fine. X-Factor had some advantages. It did allow bands to compete. That was something American Idol never did, and I thought that was a shame that American Idol never allowed bands to compete. It really is a good thing, I think, to provide bands an opportunity to break in to the field. So that was an advantage of X-Factor over American Idol. But they also had this significant problem, and it was very similar to the problem that American Idol had with this boot camp. And boot camp was a lot like Hollywood Week. And what they did during this boot camp is they put people in this unbelievably, ridiculously difficult situations where they're going to be performing with groups and other individuals who are just completely incompatible. And if you ever give that any thought, it should be obvious that if anyone has a successful career in the entertainment industry, they're not going to be performing with people who are completely incompatible, because it will not work. And I think part of what was going on there was that Simon and the other producers of X Factor were looking for the people with the big personalities, the big extroverts. But if you actually do a little bit of research into the subject, you'll find out that a lot of great actors and actresses and singers are actually introverts. They tend to be many times the more creative types. So if you get people in these situations where they're sort of forced to form relationships quickly, and those relationships may be completely incompatible, you're going to screen out a lot of people. And then there's also this issue of having people in situations where instead of getting the proper rest that they ought to be getting in the evening like normal people, they're up performing all night. And that's a very good way to be at your absolute worst the next day. Maybe that was one of the reasons that L.A. Reid was a little bit prejudiced against the older performers, because he knew that they would be less likely to be up performing all night long. But what kind of sense does that make, to place people in these situations where they're going to be at their absolute worst the next day? If you're going to do an audition, don't you want to be at your best? Don't you want to be prepared? That's a very good way to not be prepared at all. And consider the career of a singer, a musician, entertainment person. Get out on the road, get in the recording studio. Are they going to be up practicing all night on a regular basis? Are people going to practice all night long, rehearse all night long the day before a major concert? That's kind of ridiculous. There's no way you're going to be at your best in that kind of a situation. And so I feel like just with American Idol, just as it was with American Idol, that this boot camp actually served to screen out some of the best talent. Now, I like Melanie Amaro, I like Tate Stevens. Why didn't they do better? Probably because of management. I think if we actually knew a little bit more about the relationships between recording companies and stars, we would find, as I said in the video on American Idol, that stars don't have the independence that we traditionally think that they do, that they are actually subject to the demands of record company management and that sort of thing. And I'm pretty sure, if we actually know the truth, that lousy management has sabotaged the careers of a lot of people, because they're asked to perform in areas where they're not going to be that good. They don't necessarily have a lot of creative control. And I don't think that artists necessarily should have total creative control, because I'm not sure that they have the maturity to think about those kind of things in a commercial way. But I think a lot of times artists are forced to do things that are just obviously not going to work, and they know it's not going to work because they know they're being pushed into these areas that are not their strong areas, and maybe they're not allowed to play to their strengths. Maybe that's the situation that exists in the recording industry, because it certainly did exist in, you know, American Idol and in the X Factor. It put people in just these impossible situations where they're not allowed to play to their strengths, where they're not allowed to be prepared to perform, and then expect them to go and perform magnificently. I think really they need a better way to make the cuts that they have to make to get down to the numbers that are manageable to be finalists. And I don't know how to do that other than just continuing the audition process for a longer period of time, and maybe have some other people involved when the numbers are larger, maybe have some producers and some other people involved in making some cuts. Because this Hollywood Week model, this boot camp model, I really don't think it works. And I'm absolutely convinced that it cuts out some of the best talent, and I think that is one of the big failings of American Idol and also X Factor. So if an edition of X Factor were to be brought back in the future, I think they need a completely different way. They need to come up with a completely different scheme to make the cuts that they have to make. Another thing was this nonsense about the judges' homes. You get to a certain point and then the groups and the individuals that are supposed to be mentored by individual judges. Supposedly this takes place at judges' homes, but we find out pretty quickly that a lot of these judges' homes aren't really the judges' homes, that what they've done is gone out and rent places. I think Simon Cowell rented one in France one time, and then he rented a house that belonged to Alex Rodriguez in Miami one time. And why the hell they went to Miami, I don't know, because the recording industry, maybe there is a little bit of it in Miami, but the recording industry certainly isn't centered in Miami. The entertainment industry certainly isn't centered in Miami, and why a Hollywood-based show would want to do very much in this conservative Tea Party state, that doesn't make a lot of sense to me. Miami's an awfully long way from LA, so I thought that was kind of silly. Now, if judges don't want to show their real homes, then the answer to that's fairly simple. They could just put everybody up in hotels in 3 different cities and change the name of the segment, call it one-on-one or one-to-one or something like that, and use a conference room for the auditions, and have everybody stay in a hotel, maybe one in Los Angeles, maybe one in Las Vegas, maybe one in San Diego, something like that, and don't call it judges' homes if it's not really the judges' home. That's kind of ridiculous, and the audience knew it was ridiculous. And then there was this ridiculous 4-chair challenge, and I don't remember specifically how 4-chair challenge worked, but I do remember the effect was to sort of deceive people who had lost out and had been, kicked off the show and voted that they were going home. And this 4-chair challenge sort of deceived people into thinking they had made it, and then pretty quickly they found out they hadn't made it, and they were in fact going home. And I thought that was kind of ridiculous. Don't need the 4-chair challenge. So could X Factor come back, and could it be bigger and better than ever? I think it certainly could. People really like Simon Cowell. When I first started watching American Idol, and that was back in January of 2003, actually the 2nd season, it didn't take long to realize that he was really the good guy, that he was actually giving sound advice to people who were in no way qualified to be singers, and they didn't need to spend the rest of their lives, didn't need to waste the rest of their lives attempting to get into the entertainment industry or attempting to be singers, and he was actually doing those people a favor. He really was the good guy. And so Simon, I think that popularity can endure for a long time to come, but get a stable judging panel, get people who are committed to the show, and then devise another way other than this boot camp to do eliminations. Set up a situation that actually allows people to showcase their best talent, instead of putting people in these ridiculous situations that they may never ever face if they get an actual career. And then don't go through all this silliness about judges' homes if it's not really the judges' homes. Set everybody up in hotels and do it that way if judges don't want to show their real homes. If there's going to be an issue with not wanting to put their actual homes on display, then they never should have gone that route to start with. And another thing, instead of putting people in these areas where there are going to be all these distractions, I'd like to do mentoring, if it were up to me, in a place like Dutch Harbor, Alaska, or somewhere where people would be totally focused on the job at hand. Now, there will come times later on in their careers, obviously, where they would have to deal with a lot of distractions. But when you're first getting into it, allow people to do their best and to display their best. And I think if they do that you'd actually have better talent in the shows, and emerging stars who would have fantastic careers. So I hope that one day, if American Idol doesn't come back, or maybe even if it does, X Factor will come back, and it'll be bigger than ever, and we'll see huge stars come from X Factor. I don't know what you think about that, but that's my opinion. Have a great day wherever you are.